Yes, friends, Canva have finally unveiled their plans for the Affinity suite and, in the process, launched the biggest assault yet on the dynastic corporate monolith known as Adobe. The rumour mill went into overdrive as Canva shuttered the old Serif website, along with the old support forums, and, in a grade A dick move, teased us all for a full month with a vague tagline about creative freedom. But now the shrink wrap's been torn off the funky new website and the master plan has been revealed. They've made all 3 apps free, no strings attached. It's a generous gesture on the surface, but it's also one that quietly rewrites what Affinity even is. And for photographers, that change might matter more than the price tag ever did. Yes, legends, it's true. Canva have Frankensteined a new creative powerhouse into existence, and they're mostly giving it away for nothing. Affinity Photo, publisher and designer have been shoehorned into one single 3.5 gigabyte application, which now simply goes by Affinity, because much like Madonna, Prince, or Adele, it's entered its one name will do era. This is obviously a big deal for photographers and other creatives, and might well be one of the few threats that managed to restrain Adobe's soaring profit margins. In this video, unsponsored and unaffiliated as always, I'm focusing purely on the photography side of the app and how photographers might get the best out of it. The headlines are this. None of the functionality in the original trio of apps has been removed. That means you get all of those high-end, nerd-tastic Affinity Photo post-processing tools for nothing. There's no such thing as a free lunch, of course, and there are a couple of catches. You can use this new super app subscription-free, but here's the first catch. You will need to create a Canva account to do so. Nearly everyone's invited to this party. There are downloads for both Windows and Mac, and the website's teasing an iPad version in development too. No Linux version though, and I think we'll see the heat death of the universe before that happens. All 3 apps have been merged into a single super app with 4 main modules, or what Canva are calling studios: Vector, Pixel, Layer, and Canva AI. You can freely switch between modules without having to save your file in between. You can output in a comprehensive variety of file formats, and yes, you can open Adobe Photoshop PSD files. This new Affinity app comes fully loaded with a suite of AI tools, including Generative Fill, Generative Expand, and AI upscaling, although you will need a premium Canva account to use any of those AI tools. Yep, that's the second catch. But it's not all bad news on the AI front, friends. I've tested all of the new premium tools, and for the most part, they absolutely suck. And so you're not missing out on anything of any value by just using the free non-premium version. Let's dive in a bit deeper now and check out the new workflow for post-processing raw photos. If you're considering ditching your subscription and one of the other raw editors and switching over to this new Affinity app for your post-processing, then there are a couple of things to consider, not least of which is, firstly, the fact that you'll still need an app for asset management because Affinity has no file management capabilities at all. Secondly, while it has a non-destructive design, the post-processing workflow is modeled on Photoshop and not Lightroom. When you open a RAW file in Photoshop, it automatically opens in Adobe Camera Raw first, so you can do all your standard RAW edits with the increased data that you get in those RAW files, exposure, shadows, highlights, curves, etc. And then you apply those changes and the photo opens in Photoshop as a fully demosaicked bitmapped image for those more transformative edits. And in Affinity, When you open a raw file, it first opens in the Develop module, where you apply the regular raw edits to shadows, highlights, curves, etc. And then you apply those edits to move into the Pixel module to apply the same kind of bitmapped transformative edits as Photoshop. There's actually a hell of a lot more to it than that, but that's the basic flow. Here's a quick walkthrough of a raw edit so you can see how that looks in reality. Affinity has exactly the same two-stage raw post-processing workflow as Affinity Photo did. They basically just transferred it lock, stock, and barrel into the new app. And the way it works is when you open a RAW file for the first time, I've got a Canon RAW file here, you're presented with this screen where you can make your RAW edits. Because you're working from the RAW file, you have that increased latitude in terms of color recovery, dynamic range. You can tweak the color balance, all that kind of stuff. And you have to do that separately to the edits that you do when you move into the bitmap or pixel editor. So over on the right-hand side here, you've got your basic settings. I can change my white balance if I like, maybe warm it up a little bit. I've got my shadows and highlight sliders. Maybe bring the highlights down very slightly, not too much. They're not blowing out. I could come into the lens section, make sure that the lens corrections and profiles are all in place. I can, if I want, increase the kind of detail in the photograph. If you do want to sharpen your raw photograph with Affinity, I do suggest you do it at this stage. It's far better to increase the edge sharpness with a nice light touch of the detail refinement tool in this part of the app rather than later on. We've got all the usual suspects at our disposal in the tone section here with, for instance, a curves tool. Stick the old famous S-curve on there to add a little bit of contrast to the image. And there is some very basic masking in here, just using a brush. It does have edge detection, but it's not really very useful at all. Now, before you transfer over to the pixel editor, there's a couple of options up here to pay attention to, which can make your life a little bit easier. You can send the photograph over as a pixel layer, which means that it's kind of done and dusted, or you can embed or link it, which is basically the same thing. If you embed it, it means you can drop freely back into this part of the app and make further changes to the raw slider. So I strongly suggest you leave it at raw layer embedded, which is the default. So I'm now going to click the develop button. And this works along similar lines to Photoshop with layers, adjustments, filters, all that kind of stuff. We've got various options down the bottom here to make adjustments. So for instance, if I wanted to stick a bit of vibrance on this image, make it a bit more colorful, you can see it's added a new layer, a vibrance adjustment. I can just bring that up. Also bring up the global saturation just to make that look a bit nicer and fill in that color a little bit. Just remember that because you're working on a bitmap pixel image, you will not have the same latitude in these tools. Even though they mimic the stuff you do find in the raw editor, you won't have as much latitude to play with on these if you want to pull stuff back from the highlights and that kind of thing. If you want to do more transformative stuff, then you've got the filters here. And you've got the usual suspects, all the kind of things that you find in Photoshop, Gaussian blurs and all that kind of stuff, and the twirl and pinch effects that you can apply to your image. There's also a bunch of layer effects tucked down on this FX tab, but those are really useful things like text and any vector stuff that you drop on top of your photograph rather than for editing the image. In terms of just photo editing, the only tools you really need to address once you get into this section of the app are these ones in the adjustments and perhaps some of the stuff in the filter section. There is some basic AI masking in this part of the app with the object selection tool here, which you can use in the kind of drag and drop style or the single click. So if I just move around the image like this, you can see it's highlighted the sky quite nicely for me there. And we've got the kind of foreground here. You can select some of these little birds individually or the mountain. So you can use it like that, or you can click and drag to make a selection. And then once you've got your selection, you just come down to the adjustments, add something like, say, a curves adjustment to the sky. Maybe we want to make that sky pop a little bit more. Just stick a nice S-curve on there, crank up that contrast nicely, bring that down a bit more. And when you're happy with all of your edits, you can come up to the export option here. There are various options. I've got JPEG selected, but you can output as TIFF or PSD if you prefer. Click on the advanced. It's got all sorts of preset options in there for you where you can set the size and the lossy settings of the JPEGs and export that out to your computer. There are some other big drawbacks to moving over from a full RAW editor like Lightroom to a combination RAW/pixel editor, but I'm thinking in particular of masking. Affinity does have some intelligent masking tools, but nothing similar to the granular AI masks you find in Lightroom or Photolab. The object selection, which uses machine learning to select objects or regions in an image, but it's not particularly accurate, and you'll have to spend some time with the refine brush fixing flaky selections. There's also luminosity and hue masking capabilities, along with radial and gradient masking, which can be used in a dizzying variety of combinations with all filters and adjustments. Affinity have also retained the merge tools, panorama, stack, HDR merge, focus merge, and astrophotography. The pano tool is average at best. It chokes on drone panos, for instance, but the HDR focus and astro merge tools are good. And if you'd sooner shit in your hands and clap than pay over $300 for a pano tool like PT GUI, you have no reason to complain. Now, the way that Canva plan on making money from this tool, apart from simply gladdening the hearts of existing customers, is, of course, the AI. By default, there's a big button labeled Canva AI on that main toolbar, which enables you to generate fresh images from scratch or to use AI to modify existing images. And you can only use the tools housed in that Canva AI studio if you've paid up for one of the premium plans. Luckily enough for me, the missus happens to have a premium Canva account, and so I borrowed her login and put all those tools through their paces. Before we get into the photo-related AI tools, I did test that image generator and found it to be about as good as Firefly, but not as good as Sora, particularly in terms of text generation. But for photographers wanting to just post-process their photos, rather than generating facsimiles of them with a prompt, there is a surprisingly broad selection of AI tools available. The AI tools that a premium membership buys you are AI Object Selection, Generative Expand, Generative Fill, Generative Edit, Portrait Blur, Portrait Lighting, Colourise, Super Resolution, and Depth Tool selections. And in my testing, I found them to be mostly, and do please excuse the technical terminology here, shit. Let's run through them all in order. Generative Expand is subpar at best, producing very low resolution outputs that are mostly useless. If you're only expanding your crop very slightly, then you might get away with the pixelization due to that greatly reduced regeneration area, but otherwise it's a load of crap. The Generative Fill tool stubbornly refused to remove objects from my photographs, no matter how many times I tried to reword it, and when I gave up and asked it to generate something in its place, the results were often hallucinogenic, usually inappropriate, always low resolution, and in each case marked by a clear, visible boundary line. Furthermore, the text prompts are incredibly restrictive, flagging perfectly normal words such as London bus as a potential copyright infringement and therefore illegal. Occasionally, after tweaking the prompt many times, I'd finally get a result close to the desired outcome, but it's a lot of pissing about for such low-resolution results. Generative Edit is like the fill tool, but without a predefined selection. You simply describe what you want to happen, and the app completely ignores you. Portrait Blur was one of the few AI tools that work consistently, perhaps because it uses machine learning rather than any generative bollocks. The tool does fail when objects in the background that you want blurred are on the same focal plane, i.e., adjacent to your subject. And so it works best when the person is photographed face on rather than from an angle. Colourise is another AI tool that uses machine learning instead of generative AI and is therefore far more reliable. You don't get any say over the colours, apart from saturation and colour temperature, but in my testing it did a sound job on a reliable basis. Super Resolve, however, is just the latest in a long line of failed AI upscaling tools. In Affinity's defense, I would actually put it on a par with the shit-awful upscaling tool in the latest version of Photoshop, which is to say, not fit for purpose. Super Resolve is moderately effective on photographs of places or scenery, but it lacks any face recovery model training and therefore makes a very poor job of upscaling people. It's also prone to adding over-sharpened artifacts on flat surfaces like bodies of water, sucks when it comes to details, and, generally speaking, tends to blur its upscales instead of enhancing them. Side note, there is no AI denoise, so if you regularly shoot 12,800 ISO astro shots, you'll need an alternative solution. So, in summary, we have a strong selection of AI tools, all of which will degrade the quality of a photograph to a lesser or greater extent, but none of them will in any way, shape or form improve them. There is no doubting it. Canva have put a powerful photo editing tool out into the world for free, and that is to be applauded. I already own the three serif apps, Photo, Designer and Publisher, that Canva have now merged into this one single app. And so I had no problems at all finding my way around the interface. But if you're completely new to those apps, which is a likely outcome for many users given that they're now giving it away for free, then you will discover an extremely comprehensive app, dense with features, confusing in places, but easily capable of taking over the duties of Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. The AI tools that Canva are hoping to tempt you into purchasing a monthly subscription are, however, mostly a load of bollocks. Those tools that use machine learning instead of generative imaging are of some limited use, but Adobe's Generative Fill and Expand tools are far superior to Canva's at this stage in the game, particularly since they added Nano Banana and Flux Context Pro to Photoshop. Neither Adobe nor Canva have come up with a production-ready solution to AI upscaling, and the fact that Topaz Labs have the current best image resizer tells you just how much work everyone has to do. On the plus side, this app's interface is endlessly configurable. The battle-hardened code that Serif built for the old apps is fast and crash-free, and the newly merged app works surprisingly well given that it was three entirely separate apps less than a year ago. It's extremely rare for the first release of an app to be so polished, and it's a testament to the coding teams that put it together that it all knits together so well. But you knew there was going to be a but, didn't you? The problem is this. I don't trust corporations, even if they originated here in beautiful Australia. In fact, given the fact that we shat forth Rupert Murdoch's News Corp propaganda nightmare machine into the world, I don't trust corporations, particularly if they originated here in beautiful Australia. Our corporations are actually deadlier than our wildlife, and that's saying something. Canva have not released this app for altruistic reasons or because they're some benevolent organization keen only on the betterment of humankind. They are a $65 billion company, more valuable here in Australia than our former national telecoms company or our largest independent oil and gas producer. They also have 260 million worldwide paying customers already. And Affinity Studio is a tool purpose-built with one single-minded goal: to lure in more of those highly lucrative monthly subscriptions. This app and the recent launch of what Canva are confusingly calling their operating system It's designed to make them as juicy an investment target as possible when the company goes public next year. Canva claim that Affinity Studio will be free forever. But there's nothing stopping them from moving a goalpost, from moving more stuff behind a paywall, from eventually shifting the entire thing to a subscription model if the mood takes them. Google's slogan used to be, "Don't be evil." And look where we are now. For photographers, Affinity Studio is an undeniably capable tool. Smooth, robust, and remarkably complete for a zero-cost app. But Canva's motives are less about creative freedom and more about market capture. My advice? Treat it as a gift, not a promise. And that will do us for this look at the brand new all-singing, all-dancing Affinity. Have you already downloaded this Halloween surprise? How are you finding it? Are you a Canva Premium subscriber? Or is this app making you thinking about becoming one? Do let me know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, do give it a like. If you got value from it, consider subscribing to my little channel here for more photo, video, and drone-related content from me. Till the next time, guys. Ta-ta.